Hello, hello. All right. Welcome to the first of potentially many more YouTube live streams. Today I was planning on just putting a computer together. I had a lot of these random parts laying around. Hadn't put too much thought into it, but just wanted to build one. Also, I need a built computer for one of the next videos that I'm making. And so I figured, since I needed to build one anyway, might as well do it on stream. All right, so to build this, we're gonna start with putting as much stuff on, installing as much stuff in the motherboard as we can before transferring the motherboard into the case. The case right now is sitting behind me because it's a little large. But for the build today, we're gonna go an Intel build. We have an Intel i5 9600KF. The K means that it can be overclocked, and the F means that it does not have onboard graphics. So we need a graphics card, discrete graphics card, which in this case is a GeForce 1070 EVGA. And on top of that, we have our motherboard, which is a Z390 Phantom Gaming LGA 1151, compatible with our Intel processor. 2 sticks of Vengeance LPX RAM, both DDR4 2400 megahertz. And then for storage, we're just going to use, we might not even actually get to the Windows part, as long as we can get it to boot. That's all I'm really looking for right now. But for storage, in case we did want to, I have a WD NVMe SSD. And then for a cooler, we don't have anything super crazy right now. We're just using some little better than stock Cooler Master cooler. And for a power supply, we have a Corsair RM650i. So this guy is completely modular. You can see, hopefully I have all the right cables there. All right, shall we get into this? So here we have the motherboard. First thing we'll do is let's plop in the CPU. We have our Intel i5 right here, 9600KF. What we're looking for here is, as you can see, there's one corner, in this case the bottom left, that has a single golden triangle. But in that bottom left, there's a golden triangle. The bottom right, there's a little dot. Top right, little dot. Top left, a little larger of a dot. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that golden triangle and we're going to align that with the one triangle corner of the socket. So this is the socket. This is where the CPU connects into the motherboard. And this is a bit more subtle. But if you can see in the bottom left-hand corner here, you see how the corner has a little cutout. So it's not a perfect right angle. There's a little bit of cutout there, whereas every other one of the corners is a full corner. And so that's the indication that that is the right place that we need to align that golden corner. And we plop it right down into here. We shouldn't need any additional pressure. We shouldn't have to force that in. That should really just set in. And then once we're done, we're gonna latch this guy back down. And you can see I still have this protective socket cover. That'll get popped out automatically. All right, so our CPU's installed. Now we can install our RAM. So right now we're using our Vengeance LPX DDR4 RAM. This is 2400 megahertz, 2x16. We have 2 sticks here, which means we'll run our RAM in dual channel, which is great. As you can see, there's 2 sticks of RAM, but there's 4 slots here. And the order in which you put in the RAM does matter in terms of performance. In order to achieve that dual channel memory, you do have to install them in very particular slots. And that does vary from motherboard to motherboard. And I'm just going to make an assumption right now, since I don't have this motherboard's manual available, that we're going to put them in these 2 slots. This typically is the common 2 spots that I'm used to working with that allow for dual channel. And yep, this is DDR4, so we'll apply some thermal paste so that our CPU stays nice and cool. All right, we'll go with X. X is the one that I use for the majority of whenever I'm building a computer for friends, or like in my personal computer, I also use the X. You wanna just make sure that you have enough that covers the entirety of the CPU. So in this case, we have our thermal paste applied, RAM installed. Now we're just gonna use the stock cooler. Sorry, anyone who's cringing at using an Intel stock cooler. And the key here is to remember to actually plug in the cooler. So in this case, there's a handful of different options that we have, but only there's one that controls the main CPU fan, and that's right here. Sorry, it's a little hard to read here, but it says CPU_fan1 on this guy right here. We'll just plop this guy right on top of it. Line up all of these plugs with the holes. All right, so we'll install this stock cooler, and we'll make sure to plug in the cable for our CPU fan into the CPU fan header. Perfect. Oh, we also have an NVMe SSD. I was going to say that was about it. that we can install before the case, but we actually still have this NVMe. So this is our SSD. For the sake of this build, we're just going to get to the BIOS boot screen, so this isn't totally necessary for that, but it's always fun to have a full build. What we're going to do is we're going to install this into the M.2 slot that's on our motherboard, which this actually might have, I think this only has one. So here it is right here. We're going to need a really small screwdriver because right now I like to keep my M.2 screws inside of the slot so I never lose them. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to, this also only installs one orientation. So in this case, you can see that there's a little gap here, and then there's this small section and this large section of pins. We're just going to want to make sure that that can slot right into the M.2 slot on the motherboard. As you can see, that kind of slots right in. So now we're just going to want to push this guy down and re-screw the screw onto the board. And with that, we already have the standoff applied. So there we go. All right, so here's our case. And so what we're going to do, actually, I almost forgot something. So even before we install the motherboard, what we need to do is install the I/O shield. Essentially, it's the gate that blocks out dust. So we're just going to go just like that. I believe that is installed properly. If not, we'll find out soon enough. And now we're going to take our motherboard. And the goal here is to align the motherboard with the standoffs, which are the areas that we can screw screws into to secure the motherboard to the case. It's not the most secured motherboard, but it will do. All right, this is the power supply that we're going to be using for this guy. So I'm going to move some of this stuff. We're going to want to get down to this back side so that we can plug in the power supply. All right, why is there a fan here? Huh. This cable management, I can already tell you, is probably going to be pretty messy. All right, so I'm just going to use some more of these screws to screw in this power supply, and then we'll route some of these cables. And now the cable management part. And then this is motherboard power. We're going to route this guy. This will end up at the left side, or sorry, the right side of the motherboard. So I'm going to route that where that is. Our PCIe power. This is for our graphics card. It's not going to be pretty, but it will be functional. That is the goal. And then we're going to have a few cables that we have for our case to work properly. So in this case, we have our, I believe this is USB header. We're going to have our power button and stuff, but maybe we can do something more fun for our power button. Maybe instead we can install the remote control. Let's use this. How everything should be plugged in. Hopefully that all these cables stay. All right, so now that we routed some of these cables, this is the motherboard power right here. This is the biggest guy. And we're just gonna wanna plug that guy in. This also only plugs in one way. All right, so we'll plug in our USB, so that works. And I'll show you guys how to install this Bluetooth remote control so that we don't need to press the button on our case. So this guy, as I mentioned, is a Bluetooth adapter. And then on the end of it, as you can see, there's these little plugs that we can plug into power and reset. So I'm looking at the very small lettering. I believe it's these guys right here. And with that, we will now install our graphics card, which is an EVGA 1070. So we'll plop this guy in the topmost PCIe slot. All right, so now we're going to plug in our power supply into an outlet. If we did everything correctly, this computer will turn on. So I clicked the button, nothing happened. So another way that we can, and that's because I have this remote. So another thing that we can do to try to power on, or to figure out which of these pins is the right power connecting pins that we need to short out, is we can use any metal object. And this is just shorting out the pins. So in this case, if we want to know which of these pins are the power ones, as you can see, I just touched 2 pins and everything spun to life. All right, so now what we're also going to do is plug in our monitor. We're using our gorgeous Dell monitor here. Now we will switch on our power supply with the button on the power supply. If we clicked the right switch, or if we plugged in the right switch into this controller receiver, then we press the power button. It should spin to life, which it does. And ideally we get an output. Yay, it posts. Wonderful. So in this case, as I mentioned, or at least what we had plugged into this was an i5 9600KF. And as we can see here, the motherboard is reading Intel i5 9600KF. And you can also see what it's currently clocked at. If we wanted to do any type of overclocking, we would also do that inside of this BIOS screen. But it's a wonderful sign that it's reading the processor as exactly what we thought it was. That's all I have for the live today. So I hope you guys had as much fun as I did, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much.